Welcome to VLearn. This is session 9 of ASP Dot Net. Today we are going to cover different topics like ADO.NET new features, DB provider factory, SQL connection, web.config, SQL command asynchronous pattern, transaction scope, SQL data adapter. Then we will cover dataset create data reader, binding model changes with respect to the binding expression, with respect to the data source control, and SQL data source. These are the topics that we are going to cover in today's session. First topic is what are the new ADO.NET new features. New feature basically includes some classes which have some sort of commands which will help us to perform programming tasks in a more superior manner. First class is DB provider factory, second is SQL connection, next is web.config, next is SQL command, next one is transaction scope, next is SQL data adapter, and the last one is dataset. These are the list of classes that is called as a new feature into the ADO.NET. Now DB provider factory. DB provider factory, this class includes different commands like create command builder, create connection, create data adapter, and create parameters. All these commands basically help us to create the different commands with the help of some wizards. Apart from this, it also lets you to connect this command with that of the database with the help of data adapter. We can pass on different parameters to the different commands which will help in establishing the connection between these two entities. Next class is SQL connection. SQL connection, it supports the asynchronous operations. It's a kind of failover partner. It supports multiple active result sets, that is, in short, it is called as a MARS. SQL connection has the commands to establish the link from the strings in the form of connection string builders. Web.config, another class which is a new feature which is being considered as a new feature in the ADO.NET is web.config class. It includes the connection string elements like configuration manager, dot connection string, MySQL dot connection string. Apart from this, web.config class consists of protecting connection strings like use ASP net underscore regeyes dot exe to encrypt. This protecting connecting string is used basically for the sake of security because it helps us to encrypt the web.config file. So in this regard, there is a small snippet of the code like protected data. This is a kind of tag. Protected data sections. Add name is equal to connection strings. Provider is equal to RSAP protected configuration provider. Protected data sections. Protected data. In this way, we can use the connection string in different parts of the web page. Another command is SQL command. SQL command consists of asynchronous method. It requires asynchronous attribute on connection string. It is limited to non-query command. Asynchronous methods are limited to non-query commands. It's a reader or XML reader. asynchronous method supports reader or XML reader. Begin and end clause is there, which indicates the execution and non-execution of the commands. There are different executing commands like execute non-query, execute reader, execute XML reader. And the next one is it supports SQL command basically supports a pattern for three pattern for asynchronous implementation. I repeat, SQL command suppose to be implement three pattern in the form of asynchronous implementation. SQL command asynchronous pattern includes start a non-blocking execution in which asynchronous result IAR is equal to cmd.begin execute reader. Do work while command is running. In this way, SQL command it will keep on execution until done. SQL data reader is equal to cmd.end execute reader. In short, it is called as a IAR. Now, process data here, work with data reader. Start a non-blocking execution, that is asynchronous result is equal to cmd.begin execute reader. Do work while command running, while IAR is complete. Synchronous up and process data. SQL data reader is equal to cmd.end execute reader. Process data here, work with the data reader. Start a non-blocking execution. Asynchronous result IAR is equal to cmd.begin execute reader. New asynchronous callback, work with data bracket close cmd. In this way we can carry out the coding to establish the asynchronous communication with the help of SQL commands, in which we make use of the different SQL commands and SQL data readers. With the help of these commands, it is possible to work with the data. Next topic is transaction scope. In transaction scope, the transaction scope of any command, it is supposed to be support the dispose pattern. Transaction scope determines if local or distributed transactions are needed or not. Apart from this, object that support IT transaction can participate in the transaction scope, right? So dispose pattern, local or distribution need, and IT transaction participation. If it is required, then this thing is being supported by the transaction scope. Now let's have a sample program for the transaction scope, like using transaction scope TS is equal to new system dot transaction scope bool success is equal to true. Using SQL connect is equal to new SQL connection string. SQL command cmd is equal to new SQL command update cmd comma connection cmd.connection.open try cmd.execute non-query bracket close catch SQL connect exception ex ibl message.txt is equal to x message success is equal to false bracket close. If success, then transaction scope is equal to complete. So in this way, this sample program will give you an illusion that how actually the transaction scope is to be implemented. Another class is SQL data adapter. New properties includes accept change during update, and fill load option. They include overwrite changes function and take the current and original parameters. Preserve changes is the another member function which takes only the original data. Assert that takes the current version of the row. Return provider specific types means SQL data adapter basically it returns the specific data types. It updates the batch size also. Next class that we are going to cover, which is considered as a new feature in the ADO.NET, is the dataset. It supports new properties in the form of remoting format. It means now we are moving towards the format of the data from binary, or it is also available in the XML format. Schema serialization mode is there. It includes schema and excludes schema also. New method supports the data reader, which creates a reader of a data table. Dataset create data reader. Now let us learn with the help of this coding that how dataset can create data reader. Dataset data is equal to new is a key kind of keyword dataset function. SQL data adapter is equal to new SQL data adapter. Select star from employees, select star from customer. Here we have included two files. We have included the data from two different files. Configuration manager dot connection string, local nwind dot connection string, adapter dot fill data. It will access the whole data set record by record. Data table reader is equal to data dot create data reader. Do we are going to use the do loop. Do braces start while reader dot read function is there. Response dot write string dot format parameter is passed as a zeroth location, which is called as the base address of the arrays. Break tag is used with the reader. Response dot write while reader dot next result reader dot close function is there. Next point is binding model changes. The way the database get connected with the data connection string, it is being discussed under the binding model changes, which includes new data source properties, binding expressions, and data source controls. New data source properties are data source ID, append data bound items, right? So these are the things that are the part of binding model. Binding model changes. Binding expression 1 includes the data binder dot eval. It can be used anywhere. Eval is a kind of shortcut for the data binder dot eval. It means simply if you want to use the word data, it means if you want to use the shortcut for data binder dot eval is normally eval. It can be used in the context of a data bound control like modulus hash eval last name modulus tag close. In this way we can make use of this expression. Binding model changes binding expression 2. It includes xpath binder dot eval. It is used with the XML data anywhere. Xpath is a kind of shortcut for xpath binder dot eval. It can be used in the context of a data bound control. And the another expression is like tag start modulus hash xpath bracket start curly braces start double quote start orders order customer slash last name double quotes close bracket close modulus symbol tag close. This is a kind of expression. Now xpath binder dot select means it returns a node set that can be assigned to bound controls data source. Data source is equal to less than modulus hash x path select bracket start double quote start order slash summary double quote close bracket close modulus symbol tag close, right? Binding model changes binding expression 3. It includes the bind method like ASP colon text box text is equal to single quote start less than symbol modulus hash bind bracket start round bracket start double quote start notes double quote close round bracket close modulus symbol and this one. This is a two-way binding. Now the dynamic expression includes evaluated when page compiles. It includes different expressions modulus dollar symbol application settings colon application version number. Similarly resources colon resource hello string connection string colon local ambient and so on. Binding model changes includes different data source controls that has tabular data source control which further includes access data source, object data source and SQL data source. So these three data source comes under the category of tabular data source controls. Hierarchical data source includes sitemap data sources, XML data sources and data source view. Binding model changes with respect to data source control. SQL data source 1 includes the properties for all of the actions like deletion, insertion, updation, selection. Apart from this, it also includes different commands, parameters and command type. Filter expression is there along with the filter parameters. It only works with the dataset for the data source mod, right? Binding model changes, that is the data source controls with SQL data source. Data source mode includes the determination of that how the data is returned from dataset or data reader. Data किस फॉर्म में रिटर्न होता है, that is the part of data source mode. It includes cancel select on null. It means cancel data retrieval if parameter is null. If we are using this source control as cancel select on null, it means cancel data retrieval is possible if parameter is null. Binding model changes includes data source controls, SQL data source, which contains command having own set of parameters. The first one is declarative parameter, which further includes different control parameters, cookies parameter, form parameter, profile parameters, query string parameters and session parameters. Caching behavior includes cache duration, cache expiration policy, which ultimately takes absolute sliding as a parameter. Next is cache key dependency, SQL cache dependency. It is created with each distinct SQL commands, connection string and select parameters. A synchronous feature of ADO.NET can help in some situation. Connection string builder is there. New transaction scope simplifies transactions. Binding expression simplify page development. New data source objects simplify binding to SQL server and objects. With this, we are going to finish this session. But before we end this session, there is a do-it-yourself exercise for you. So in this regard, there are two questions for you. First question is you have to explain the data source controls like SQL data source. आपने इस data source को explain करके बताना है. Next question is what are the ADO.NET new features? You have to highly focus on to the new features of the ADO.NET. With this, we are going to finish this session. Thank you.